What?
I was just telling Ellie, don't give them out yet.
And Rachel's maybe gonna come sit listen too.
Okay.
All right, wait, is Eric ready? He might not be ready yet.
I guess I'm ready. So you ready?
I know this is so on time for you, Eric. So I don't know.
I'm
I
gonna
mean,
turn my phone off.
for the jazz and
I think we
should.
could sort of take it. I'm gonna adjust some lights a little bit. We got enough chairs for a start. We got wine. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
We got you two.
What more?
Excellent. I'm gonna
What more can we want?
douse a little bit of light.
All
with
right.
that. Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi.
We'll do this.
While we're waiting, I'm curious, how many people are fly fisher people? Okay,
We
so
have-
you got
we
some. I
have-
figured.
Yes.
All right,
Okay, good.
Beth, you should sit
And
in the
this is
front.
3 generations of one family.
Is that
Yeah.
I think we need to take time to get cushions.
okay?
Okay.
What? Take time for cushions?
I think we should have cushions for this crowd. So give me
Okay.
a second.
What's your help?
Okay.
Get-
Hand them some cushions.
Here, I'll go help him some cushion. They just want to hear about the fly fishing.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff.
Where y'all going? You gonna help me with cushions? Let's go, let's go. Let me sit down.
I tried to help earlier, and he said, better if you don't help.
All right.
I've been told that a lot.
Everyone has to stand up.
Okay.
Late people get nice cushions.
Yeah.
There's a couple down. Oh, take Let's see.
By the way, I've never been in this neighborhood before, ever.
Oh,
I used to live in San Francisco. I've been here 1,000 times. It is so lively.
it's a great neighborhood.
Really nice.
Yeah, yeah. Don't be shy. Sit in front.
You paid for a front row seat.
I know,
May as
me
well
too.
get a
Well, I
front
don't
row
know.
seat.
Maybe some of the backbenchers should come up so the stragglers can have a place to
Yeah, there
sit,
you
but
go.
that's okay.
Is everybody comfortable
All right.
to the extent possible if Brett and Beckett is
Very
not
much.
that?
How does someone access the live stream?
The easiest thing to do is just go to our website. There's a little video screen up at the top, and they can just enlarge that to watch it. There's also underneath it says watch us on Facebook and YouTube, and they don't look like links, but they are. So if you go to our YouTube channel or our Facebook page. And this will be up after the fact, so if you need to review for the exam at the end of the semester,
Excellent,
you
excellent.
can bring it right back up
Yeah.
and watch it all over again. Now, David, you left your fly fishing with Leonardo baseball cap over here. Is it a fly fishing cap?
No, that's my daughter. Our daughter made that for me, and I wore it because it's cold outside. But
It's cold outside.
yeah.
Well, welcome.
I think I'm going to put that mic a little bit closer and
Okay.
it'll be
Okay.
a little better sound.
Okay.
I think. Not too much closer, but like that.
Terrific.
We feel so official now.
It's
Yeah.
going to be all right. Everything is going to be all right. Okay, welcome to Bird and Beckett. Here's the show.
Thank you for
Yeah, well,
having us.
thank you to Eric. So, and thank you for everyone for coming. Many of you, but not all of you, know I had the pleasure of getting to meet and know David and his wife Claudia in the background, who's the photographer of the day. And he kept talking about this book he'd been working on, his 5-year passion project. And you know, you don't know someone that well, and okay, maybe we'll see how good it is or not. But I'm very happy to say now that it's come out and I've read it all, it's actually really interesting. Really nice writing style, and I really enjoyed reading it. Learned about geology, chemistry, hydrology, all these things, as well as fly fishing. So there, we have fly fisher people in here. I knew nothing about it. I told David I might like to learn, and immediately he's like, okay, in an hour, and we'll we still haven't done it, but I now get fly fishing. So even if you don't like fly fishing, I now understand it a little bit. So we'll talk about it. So I feel very lucky that he's here to talk to us about it. And I was just going to ask him some questions, and I don't know if it hasn't been out that long, so I don't know if people have had a chance to read it yet.
1 month.
1 month.
Yeah.
But if other people have questions, and then also we'll see how time goes, and we can have a bit of a reading. So I want to talk not so much to start about the fly fishing. So one of the things I was thinking about is, why are only men fly fisher people? It's a very male-dominated, passion, it seems. But I was thinking, I said, well, I know David's going to have some example. He'll say, well, that's not completely true. And throughout the book, he intersperses he and she very nicely. But I said, I'm still going to ask it. And then the very next chapter, there was a whole chapter on Dame Juliana Berners, who was a Benedictine nun and royalty, and who wrote one of the first treatises on fly fishing. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about her to start.
I'd love to talk about her, and I do want to say that traditionally fly fishing has been male dominated. There's been a lot of work, probably not enough, on getting women into fly fishing. There's something called Project 50/50, which a number of fly shops and guides are working on to try to get more women into the sport. And my own observation is that women learn to fly fish much more quickly, largely because us Y chromosome people tend to, if we're not making a long enough cast, we try harder. And as these gentlemen back here know, particularly the aspiring guide, the youngest of the group, the harder you work a fly rod, the less effective it is. It's a very gentle motion, and women take instruction better. So, I mean, this is fact. That's not an opinion. Dame Juliana Berners is a particular. Oh, and Joan Wolfe. So the person who did a lot for fly fishing, Lee and Joan Wolfe, who did a lot for Orvis and invented a lot of flies, but Lee Wolfe died in a plane crash up in Alaska, and Joan Wolfe carried on this tradition. She was the first woman that really competed against men in fly fishing competition, which is a contest to cast longest distance with greatest accuracy, and she won. She was a former dancer, and she won. And I think her world record was set here at the casting ponds in Golden Gate Park. And right now, the phenomenon, and I'm not into competition fly fishing or casting. I'm not really good enough to do either one, but there is a young woman, and when she sort of started winning championships, she was 15 years old, and she practices up at the casting ponds in Golden Gate Park. So it has been male dominated for a long time. Juliana Berners was this nun. Some people dispute that she even existed. She wrote a pamphlet about fishing with a fly. So this is before this was with a stick.
Remind me what year, roughly?
Yeah, thank you. So around 1400. And so she was a dame, so she was some sort of minor gentry or nobility, and she ends up being an abbess, I think. And she wrote a book. At that time, men and women hunted and fished both, and who were at court. So she ends up as a nun. We don't have the story why, but she wrote a book on hunting, and then she wrote a pamphlet to go along with it on fishing with a fly. Now she talks about how to make your own hook, how to make your own rod. This is not something most people do. I mean, some people build rods, but they tend to, you buy the blanks. She's saying, no, you get a branch this long and of this type of wood, and you make it. And so she gives all this instruction, but she buries it in a book that on other subjects, because she doesn't want sort of the riffraff becoming anglers and keeping too many fish. I mean, everybody kept fish there, but she didn't want people to be pigs about it. And she talks about etiquette on the river, and don't steal the fish out of some poor guy's pond and all this. So she's very interesting, but she has strong opinions on people, particularly about lazy people. And this ties her in. I make the point in the book that it ties her in very well with Leonardo, because he was a big believer that you shouldn't waste your time, and he didn't. He was into everything. And so I argue, she was British, he's obviously Italian, and that they would have gotten along quite well, because they both didn't like lazy people and thought people should go out and do productive things.
Yeah, and it's really, she was an environmentalist and all sorts of
Yes.
stuff way before her time. Well, so talking about Leonardo a little bit, you got we're privileged enough to go to these amazing different locations to look at original sources and original documents of his. Was there a favorite place or location that you went to?
This is not scripted. Can I interject my 2 minute and 51-second reading right now?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So this is the one thing I want to read to you. This is a chapter called "In Search of the Holy Grail." Martin Clayton is a serious man with a serious job. Officially, his title at the Royal Collection Trust is Head of Drawings and Prints. Like the English, the title is understated. I would call him the guardian of Western civilization and culture. He was appointed, however, not by an ebullient American, but by the trust that oversees the British royal family's unparalleled collection of castles, weapons, furniture, clocks, and artwork. There are more than 100,000 drawings and prints acquired since 1641 by the houses of Stuart, Hanover, and Windsor, notably including 550 drawings by Leonardo da Vinci, the ones from that nice thank you gift. That's a previous chapter. Clayton entered the small and businesslike security office reception room down a few stairs at exactly the agreed upon time. There's nothing regal about this setting, but I had already checked into the official pass office outside the thick castle walls and then approached, uphill and imposing, the Henry VIII gate of Windsor Castle. 3 men in uniform bearing machine guns were friendly in the greeting at the gate, as well-armed and well-trained men can afford to be. They told me where I needed to go, across a wide stretch of castle, past perfectly manicured lawns, past the enormous and stout tower that protected medieval kings and their courtiers, through a small archway to a modest doorway marked Side Door Private. I stopped along the way to watch a group of the Queen's Guards in their scarlet coats and tall bearskin hats march in perfect formation up the pavement to their posts. The castle was closed to the public on that cold, sunny, blustery day. I was alone, and I chose to imagine that this was all for me. And it was regal indeed. Clayton led me up a flight of stairs and into the print room, which is actually 3 large rooms surrounded by bookcases. They're not tall rooms, and the ceilings are made of embossed metal panels that Americans consider antique, but they're not old by castle standards. The rooms were established in the 1850s by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who spent many evenings enjoying their vast collection. Instead of books on the bookcases, there stand side by side hundreds of hinged boxes covered in beautiful red leather and stamped in the small gold letters RCT. Each one contains treasures. For Clayton, this must have seemed like a normal day at the office, and I was only one of his many responsibilities for that day. For me, it was the entry into heaven. So I'm going to, later on, we'll show you some of these pictures, but I'm going to show you this. So this long answer to your question is, this is the favorite place I got in my research. So the picture at the top is the long walk behind Windsor Castle, and down below is this fabulous area about the size of this bookstore, 3 rooms divided like that, and there's all these leather cases, and in these there are 500, along with a lot of other things, 550 original drawings by Leonardo da Vinci, and by far, and the best drawings of water that we want to talk about some today, and river currents, are owned by then the Queen, at this time the King of England, and they're in that room. And I had the unbelievable privilege of going in and spending the day studying the 41 that I wanted to see.
Yeah. What did that feel like? To think about being with his stuff by yourself in a room, it almost gives me chills.
Well, it really gave me chills. And I had seen these drawings. I've been working on this project for a couple of years. So I had seen these drawings over and over and over. And I had this crazy idea that I wanted to study the originals. And so holding an original drawing, and you say, okay, Leonardo, 550 years ago, made this drawing, and he's this extraordinary human being. And so people worship, a lock of Lincoln's hair, or an autograph by George Washington or Queen Elizabeth I, who was born long after Leonardo died, just to give a little context, to hold these drawings that are so important to what I was interested in, which is why was Leonardo so fascinated with river currents and how does that relate to us as anglers? And for many, and he was not doing this to go fishing, but to hold these drawings and study them and see, in some cases, their power, because many of them are just tiny, and they could be this big. The detail, the sureness of his pen stroke, many of these are, some of them are done actually as sort of a work of art. Some of them are done very much for science, and some of them are little sketches that he would
Little
make in his
doodles.
notebook as he's writing out something that he's trying to figure out. What happens when a small stream hits a big stream? What happens when there's a steep gradient? What happens when water hits a boulder and then another boulder? So let me stop there and just say it was absolutely thrilling. And I chose that particular day. I was offered 2 days, a Wednesday and a Thursday. And on Thursday, I could go for 4 hours, 5 hours. And on Wednesday, I could go for 5.5 hours. I'm taking the extra 30 minutes with these treasures.
Well, just to follow on with that, with the water and the flow, like his understanding, and as you mentioned in the book, which I had no idea, much of his money was made as a hydraulic engineer.
Yes.
And he had huge hydraulic plans for the Arno River, and
Yes.
not all of which came to fruition. But for the doctors in the room, he also described the aortic valve hydraulics and it was many, like only in this century,
Yes.
well, I guess last century, in the 1900s, that we figured out and proved he was right in terms of how it works and how it closes. But he had all of that in his drawings. Maybe you could take one of the rock pictures or something and just
Okay.
show briefly for like the non-anglers as well as the anglers, like why it's important and what made you connect these drawings with the fishing
Okay.
that you did.
Okay, thank you. I would love to do that. So I'm going to interject something else. So Leonardo, just for context, we're not talking about Leonardo DiCaprio here. This Leonardo da Vinci is born 1452 and dies in 1519. He is born 23 years before Michelangelo. So there are books written about their rivalry, but he's the old guy. Michelangelo sees himself as the new generation, the new guy on the block, and he's the only person that Leonardo really didn't care for because he was pretty rude to Leonardo. And he dies 28 years before Elizabeth I is crowned Queen of England, and 45 years before Shakespeare and Galileo are born, which is in the same year. So this is how long ago this is, 1452. And I like to say this is the Leonardo that most of you know. There's water in the picture of the Mona Lisa, and we could talk about that at great length, but we won't. And this is what got me started. And this is getting closer to answering your question, but then I'll show the rocks. So I saw this drawing when I was reading Walter Isaacson's biography of Leonardo, which came out in time for the 500th anniversary of his death. And you see a sort of there's an old man. It's probably a caricature of Leonardo by Leonardo. And it shows on the right-hand side 3 drawings of a river current hitting obstacles at different angles and drawing. So what happens to that water as what kind of currents does it set up? And
Can I have that?
so
I'm going to have that passed
yes.
around.
Okay, good.
We pass that around.
And so at the bottom of that page, I may have another copy. At the bottom of that page are a whole bunch of different drawings of obstacles where Leonardo makes all these sketches in a notebook now owned by Bill Gates. There's another copy.
Oh.
And you can just move that. Whoop, I'm going to try not to fall on my face here. Just send that back a row or two. So what is very important. So in fly fishing, or in fishing in general, there's certain places that fish like to be in a river. And it's not most places. the old aphorism is 90% of the fish are in 10% of the river. So to figure out where the fish are, we have to read the water. We have to figure out where are the conditions right below the surface, because that's where the fish are, below the surface that a trout particularly will be. And there's generally 3 or 4 conditions. It needs to bring food to them because they're eating all the time. So fast water is good, but they don't want to be in fast water. They want to be in slow water because they don't want to be treading water against the current. So fast water next to slow water, the seam, that's one. Having plenty of good dissolved oxygen is good. Having a place to run, we say run, they don't have legs, but run for cover in case a fish-eating bird flies over. They need protection, and they need also, part of that is a way out. So they won't be in a perfect spot that's surrounded by imperfect spots where they're stuck. So we need to read the water. Leonardo needed to read the water because he was hired to improve locks, build bridges that would not wash away in a flood, buttress the bank so that you didn't have erosion of property which was often owned by the crown or the duke, etc. So he was interested for military reasons and commercial reasons. So in both Florence and in Milan, where he did his most productive work, canals were the thing. And so the Arno River goes through Florence, but Pisa downstream was irascible or something. They didn't like Florence. Well, Florence bought Pisa and taxed everybody, so that's a good reason not to like your landlord. And so eventually Pisa cuts Florence off from the sea, and so Leonardo comes up with this plan. Say, well, we'll show them. First of all, we'll divert the Arno away from Pisa. They were in a 12-year war, and we'll cut off their water, sort of lay siege to them. He had a plan for that. And then he also had a plan after the news got out that there was this New World thing going on, and different countries and city-states were making a fortune by exploiting and exploring our world. He said, well, if we rerouted the Arno around Pisa, we could be an inland port in Florence, I don't know, 60 miles upstream. And so he had a whole plan to do that. They started, it didn't work out. It's hard to move mountains with a pick and a shovel, but that's sort of how they started out doing it. And eventually that's exactly the path of one of the current superhighways in Italy. So maybe I should stop there.
Yeah, so back to the rock and the fly fishing. So I got a rock here. I'm just going to redirect. So just because I now, like I said, I get fly fishing. So I got a rock. Here's the rock. Mm-hmm. Here's the river coming this way.
Yes.
Where's the fish going to be?
Okay, thank you. I do this a lot. I mean, Lisa knows me well enough. She knew that would happen. I didn't set it up.
But you don't even need the picture. You can just show me where's the rock. Where's the fish going to be?
So the fish.
The river's going this way.
Yeah. So the fish is going to be in 3 places relative to the rock. The currents. Okay, it's going to be behind the rock, but not right behind the rock, because when the water comes around the rock, it doesn't bring the food right behind the rock where the current meets down behind the rock. That's
here.
where the food's going to be.
Okay.
Okay. In front of the rock, Leonardo uses this word percusses. The current bangs into the rock and bounces off and forms a cushion in front.
Ooh.
So sometimes a fish will sit right in front of the rock because this water's coming around, but the backwash, if you will, makes a nice calm place to sit. You want to eat it. Eat the bugs as they come down. Once in a while, right beside the rock, because there's a little bit of bounce off, you can be right close to a rock on the side, and that's a good place. And I will say, personally, I've had a lot of luck fishing. If I can't see right on the other side of the rock, on the side, that means the fish can't see me either. So sometimes I'll put a cast over and it'll float the other side of the rock, and I'm watching for a little bit of a splash or a little bit of a sound and catch the fish. A little bit blind fishing, but that's fun. Leonardo, the drawing that I passed around, on the bottom of it, there's all these different situations. One rock in front of two rocks in front of one. And these are subsurface. So because Leonardo's putting bridge pilings down and this sort of thing, he wants to know what's happening underneath the surface. And for anglers, most of the bugs that fish eat, or the crustaceans, are down in the water column. Yeah. We are not that good at telling what's happening subsurface, even though we fish wet flies as well as dry flies, so nymphs that are down underneath the surface, and we need to know what's happening. Well, Leonardo understood this better than anybody in the past, and this is why when I say fly fishing with Leonardo, I'm not saying he was an angler. He would have been the world's greatest guide for many reasons.
And in fact, he built glass tanks to do some of these experiments, to look and see what was happening under the water. And several of our friends here, we were in Amboise together. Many of the things he's built are there in where he in theory died or lived.
He died. I mean, he died there.
Yeah, where he died. Anyway, a lot of these things. So you mentioned Bill Gates. So his writings, he was prolific, but he just wrote, notes, and he for years, and again, all learned in the book, and then others tried to collate the notes, but he would have this, they would all be mixed on the same page. But there are these codexes that were saved, and one is the Leicester Codex.
Yes.
And it was bought. The other thing I'll say is he calculated the gravitational constant.
Yes.
Very close to what it's just mind-boggling the things he did. But the Leicester Codex was bought by Bill Gates.
Yes.
And what is he doing? Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay.
And why he bought it and what he's trying to do with it, which will be really
the
cool.
Earl of Leicester owned this codex, so a manuscript in, I don't know, 1700, let's say, and owned it for a long time. He, in order to raise money because of the taxation laws in England, sells it. Arm & Hammer buys it and changes the name after all these decades and 2 centuries from Codex Leicester to Codex Hammer. Modest. Bill Gates, that he needs to sell it, Bill Gates buys it for, I think, $43 million about 25 years ago. So inflation adjusted, it is still the most valuable book in the world. And although Leonardo was sort of, somebody said to me, and I hadn't really thought of this, well, he was obviously ADD. Do you think he was on the spectrum? I thought, well, I'm not qualified, especially sitting with a doctor, to diagnose somebody who died 500 years ago, but he absolutely followed the shiny object. So he's writing about water, and the next thing you know, he's writing about anatomy, and the next thing you know, he's writing about light bouncing off the moon and gravity and all kinds of geometry. This book is it's very concentrated on water and river currents. And so what Bill Gates has done with this book in a great example of American philanthropy, it's one of the things that I think we can be extremely proud of our country. A lot of things we're not proud of. Philanthropy is very special in America. So Bill Gates has disassembled the book, and I think it's got 37 sheets, and he has exhibited it once a year up until COVID in a different country in the world where we can go and share in these unique drawings that he owns, particularly focused on water and river currents, in the same way that I had the privilege of going and looking at the royal family's collection of their drawings.
And isn't he developing a 3D representation
of
some of the water drawings?
Yes. So he, together with a scholar then at UCLA and a scholar at Oxford, developed this idea of, okay, let's take these drawings and make them come alive. And it was released initially on a DVD, and then those have disappeared. I tried to find one and buy them. I looked every place, and I think they weren't happy, and they bought them all back. So this is something that this bookstore should get a couple of copies of, and call me first, please. But yes, one of the fascinating things, if any of you saw the Ken Burns documentary on Leonardo 2 weeks ago, and it's available to download on PBS for the next 45 days. It's a 4-hour documentary, but making these concepts come alive in the way that Leonardo couldn't. He didn't have motion pictures or the little storybooks that move, but he illustrates movement in water in a remarkable way. So let me stop there.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I have lots more questions, but I think we also people might want to buy and sign books. I'll ask if people have any questions in the audience, and then otherwise I might, Beth has one. She may.
How, at what point did you, I mean, you love fishing, you've
Yes.
really been a fly fisher for a long time. And then the connection to Leonardo would not have been immediately obvious to many of us.
Yes.
So how did that come about in your life?
It was,
That drawing.
it's that drawing.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so thank you. The question was, I love fly fishing. I saw a drawing. It wouldn't be immediately obvious to me. It seemed to me immediately obvious. This was not something I thought about for weeks or months. I looked at that drawing that we passed around, I think, of Leonardo looking at those river currents, and I said, well, he's trying to figure out what happens with river currents. That's what we do when we stand in the river. This is he may as well be fly fishing. He's trying to read the water. This was not, it didn't seem to me to be a big breakthrough. I didn't run around saying, I figured something out. I didn't. It was just there. And so then I just started looking to see, are there any more of these? And there's quite a few. And some of them are even more exciting than that one. And the more I found, the more excited I got about this. So then I started saying, well, I wonder if somebody's told. Everybody should know about this. I mean, everybody here obviously wants to know. Everybody should know about this, certainly every angler. So I set out to write, when I found out it didn't exist, I had to do this. I've never written, I don't think I've written anything longer than 5 pages in the last 50 years. But this was a story I wanted to shout from the rooftops. Hey, everybody, look at these cool drawings, especially anglers. And my idea was to write a book on reading the water. Where are the fish under different situations? Because he describes all these different situations and sketches them. And I was going to write this for anglers and help people who fish, fly fishers, understand how to read the water using the drawings of Leonardo together with a photograph of the same situation on a river. And so that's the road I started going down. And eventually Leonardo seduced me. He was so interesting. The more, every biography I read, I learned new things. And so he got to be bigger and bigger in this thing that I was writing. I was also reading a lot of books on reading the water. And my ego about my ability to teach anybody about reading the water went down as Leonardo was going up. And I said, I have no business writing. I'm not that good. So I changed my audience. And my audience was, the people I wanted to tell was everybody, not just anglers, but everybody, because I thought the drawings were fantastic and I hadn't seen them. And Claudia and I owned a book from way back when. It was probably published in the 50s that we had bought in a used bookstore in Philadelphia that was the complete drawings of Leonardo da Vinci. We had it for decades. I don't remember these. So these were, that may have been in there, but this was earth-shaking to me and I wanted everybody to know. So I dropped the idea of a how-to manual for anglers and just said, I want everybody to know about Leonardo and water. And oh, by the way, there's a lot of other cool stuff about Leonardo, but most of the biographies published since 1912 of Leonardo are 400 to 700 pages. And unless you happen to be a biography reader or are really into Leonardo da Vinci, and I hope that my 3 fly fishing colleagues will agree, what we do, we're not the brightest group in the world. You know, it's like there's the people who follow the little white ball around. Well, we're trying to outsmart a creature with a brain the size of a pea. This is just the truth, and we do it all day. And if we get fortunate enough to outsmart them when we catch a fish, then we let it go. So I started saying, you know, if you're going to write a book like this for fly fishermen, it needs to be short chapters, large print, and lots of pictures. And there it is.
Well, it's lovely. Any other? Yeah, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you for speaking to all this. I read on your website, your bio, and you have a lot of very diverse interests.
Can't hold down a job. Yeah.
I could tell, like many of us.
Yeah.
What's your next book project?
My standard reply is one and done. I write book, singular. And so this thing just grabbed hold of me. I had to write it. If somebody else had written this book, I think I would have been happy. So I have no plans to write a book. There are three things that I'm interested in. And if there was a book, there's two that could be maybe articles. I don't know where they would be published. Those are, how much did the Mona Lisa cost in today's dollars? And that's a little puzzle, and I'm working on it. We actually know what the King of France paid for 4 paintings, and we know how much gold was in it at the time. But medieval and Renaissance historians say you can't use that money coming forward. I'm a business person. Well, give me a guess. I mean, not a guess, but give me an estimate. I don't have to be 100% right. If I can get in the right order of magnitude, that'd be good enough for me. So I'm working on that. Another thing is Leonardo actually, everybody in this room knows what water rights are, but most people in the United States don't. But Leonardo was given some water rights by the Duke of Milan, 2 ounces. Well, that didn't mean a bit of a cup, but nobody knows what 2 ounces meant. Now it's a term, ounces of water. It was a measurement of water. So is that 2 ounces a second, or 2 ounces like an acre foot? Maybe it's an acre inch or something like that. Nobody knows. So, well, okay, I got nothing better to do. I'm retired, so I want to go find out. And then the third is, and this is far afield, but the role of music in evolution. Every society seems to have developed a particular, music's important worldwide. And I'm not an anthropologist, but I suspect that if it arose everywhere, in every society, at every time, maybe there's some survival advantage in music. So I've got a nice list from an Oxford experimental psychologist of 300 academic articles on this subject. So
We'll see.
But I doubt there's another book. I really need to go fishing more.
Any other questions? Well, you can all see why Beth and I feel so lucky to have gotten to know David. And thank you so much for coming and doing this reading.
Thank you, Eric, and for
I will.
having us here. Yeah.
Thank you, Eric. If you're doing your Christmas shopping for books, please do it here to support local bookstores. And I think David will sign books if you want him to over there. And there's wine, and hang out and say hello to each other. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you
for
all
coming.
for coming. I want to meet each and every one of you. Thank you.
Yeah,
that was
that was
good.
great.
And thank you for.
She's
Yes.
no.
So Lisa, you may remember I talked to you about the extra.
I do.
I
look familiar.
Hello.
Yes.
You saw me?
I taught the
Oh my God!
This is so funny. So I got you. Congratulations. Somebody here.
Very. Chris, we are down. We're living way up in the mountains.